It has never, ever been easier to learn languages. And I say that because I have discovered yet another way that modern technology makes it easier to learn. Remember, to learn a language, you don't need to do drills. You don't need to remember lists of words. You don't even need to do Anki decks. What's required to learn a language and become fluent in a language is simply to engage with the language, enjoy the language. And that requires interesting content. And gradually, your brain will get used to the language. When you're curious about some aspect of the grammar, there's so many resources now to look things up. The conjugation table, what does this mean? Google Translate, you name it. So there's no shortage of things to help you. But first, if you aren't triggered, if you aren't sucked in by interesting things, you will not learn. And so lo and behold, I'm on YouTube and I'm interested in history, and so they suggest to me a channel in French called Herodotus in English, who talks about history in French and haplogroup and all this stuff. I'm not, the DNA of different ethnic groups who have migrated over history. Just a tremendous collection of fascinating videos on history, mostly in French, although some have been automatically dubbed in English, which I didn't appreciate. So I grabbed the thing in French, grabbed the URL, and then I posted into Notebook LM, and I've done this now for a number of videos, and I can now produce a podcast in Persian, in Arabic, in Japanese, in whatever language I want. So if, for example, the video in question from Herodote is about the genetic composition of Japanese people, then I will convert that into a Japanese language lesson. If, in turn, it is about Arab genetic history and migrations and languages and evolution of the Afro-Asiatic group of languages, which originated in the Horn of Africa and spread across North Africa to Algeria, Morocco, and in the other direction to Syria, Iraq, and southward to the Arabian Peninsula. If that's the subject, then I convert it into Arabic and I study that as a lesson on link. So I am learning about something of interest. So I'm not sort of deliberately trying to learn the language. I have to learn the language. I'm not setting goals for myself. I'm not deliberately trying to learn words. I'm learning things of interest to me through the language. And whenever you can do that, you are going to be successful. In fact, that was my experience with the very first language that I was under some pressure to learn. Well, French at school. I got interested in French. I watched movies in French. I eventually went to France. But when it came to Chinese, I found that I was able to learn because I was interested. If I compare myself to the other students, diplomatic language students in Hong Kong at the time, I did it faster than they did. And that had two advantages. First of all, I learned it faster. So after 9-10 months, I was able to interpret, and I could read some fairly demanding material in Chinese. But I remember coming away with the impression that the more intensively you study the language. So if most of my colleagues were taking 2 years to learn what I did in 1 year. I learned it better. Lifting weights, if you lift a weight and then rest and then do it again, you're not going to achieve much. You have to create intensity. Intensity is so important, but you cannot artificially create intensity. You can't force yourself to study with intensity. You can only study with intensity if you are very motivated. And one of the best motivations is interesting, comprehensible content. And never has it been easier to generate, to find, and to create or to combine all kinds of interesting material, convert it into the language of your choice. If you want a podcast, a dialogue, a monologue, whatever you want, more and more you can create content of interest. And with AI, you can even interact with this content of interest, and you can ask questions about grammatical structure if that interests you, but at your own schedule, because you are driven by your interests. And all of these things have now become so much easier than ever. And when I think about, for example, the billions of dollars that the Canadian government, for example, spends to try to make Canadians more bilingual, and it's not working, because deliberate instruction of people who are not motivated doesn't work. Whereas a minimum of deliberate instruction based on enthusiastic engagement with content of interest is going to achieve far better results. So that's why I say it has never been easier to learn a language.